Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Master's Class. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go through the East Asian world. So we're really going to kick things off with China, particularly the Ming and Qing dynasties. So this matters because the Ming and Qing dynasties are two of the longest lasting dynasties, particularly the Qing. And China is going to reach new heights of political power, military power. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of European interaction. We're going to talk a bit more about that. And China kind of goes through a transition of power between like barbarians come in and they go out. Then Chinese people start to take over for themselves, sovereignty, self-ownership, self-rule. Then what they would consider to be another barbarian group comes in, takes control, and then that's going to be a theme that keeps on happening. And so let's take a look at that actually. So one of the first big barbarian groups that goes out would be the Mongolians. So the Yuan dynasty, also known as the Mongol dynasty in China, it's going to be overthrown in 1368. And what winds up happening is the same thing that happens to pretty much any dynastic ruler, any dynasty. And we're going to see these themes appear for both the Ming and the Qing dynasties in China as well. So what winds up happening is that peasants are going to revolt. There won't be enough land. There's going to be crop disasters, things that might indicate that the heavens no longer support your mandate to heaven. You no longer have the mandate to rule over the people. And we're going to see how that kind of plays a factor here. So in 1368, the Mongols are out and the Ming are in. And it starts with the Ming Hongwu Emperor, all right, the Ming Martial Emperor. And this dynasty is fairly long lasting. It lasts until 1644, replaced by the Qing. So what winds up happening here is under the Ming emperors, we're going to see China extend its rule into Mongolia and Central Asia, basically taking over the land of what once was, in their minds, their oppressors. And they're going to make peace with the nomadic tribes that had troubled them for centuries all along the northern frontier. But they don't just rely on that peace. They're going to strengthen and build up the Great Wall. In fact, if we can find a decent image here, yep, you can find the Great Wall. You can see that they shape it very much to the geography and the topography that they have available to them, sort of separating out all these sort of northern and Central Asian barbarian tribes, like the Mongols and the Manchus, we'll talk about in just a moment. So when it comes to Ming rule, there's going to be a couple of hallmarks. One is the construction of the Grand Canal. And we're going to see this Grand Canal. It's just built, and you can see it goes all the way from northern to southern China, particularly on the East Coast. And this is important for a few reasons. One, it's going to allow this sort of reconstruction of the Grand Canal, the renovation of it. It's going to make it possible to ship grain and other goods from southern to northern China. So you can take goods from the north to the south and from the south to the north. Very important. This is going to be huge, actually, for one, keeping an eye on all the major influential cities under control of the empire, under the dynasty. And it's also going to allow the spread of crops. So with new crops being introduced to new areas, food production is going to increase, the population is going to soar, and as I mentioned, it's not just good for your population, this also has negative effects, we'll get into that in a bit. It's great for effectively organizing your government, so this allows for a very centralized bureaucracy to sort of oversee all these different cities and provinces. And allows people to communicate more effectively, such as setting up schools where local officials could be chosen by a civil service examination. So, you go to school, you take this exam, you pass, and then bam, you help run the government. Pretty fantastic stuff. Um, and this, of course, leads to, them overseeing how are you going to distribute those crops? Well, maybe we have enough farmers. Maybe we should start diversifying into workshops and factories. We're going to see those explode as well. So this is kind of a new era. So you'll even note the Ming Dynasty truly begins a new era of greatness in Chinese history. But the Qing will not be outdone. We'll get into that in a moment here. So Hongwu rules for quite a long time. This is why you have these very stable dynasties that last for so long. You have these rulers who last for quite a bit period of time. The longer you can rule, the more stable your dynasty or empire is likely to be. So after Hongwu, his son Yongle becomes the emperor. In 1406, Yongle begins construction of the Imperial City, Beijing. So we can see on the map Beijing right here in the north. And if you look to this other map, right around here, right north of Beijing, is where Manchuria is located, the land of the Manchus. So they're kind of keeping a close eye on those barbarian tribes up north, just in case. They're close to the wall, they're keeping an eye on them. And the Imperial City, of course, when we move the capital from Nanjing to Beijing, we have this new seat of power. And, moving the capital and constructing the Imperial City, this creates jobs. It creates jobs at every level. Government officials are going to have to be close to the emperor. You're going to have people who peddle food in and around the Imperial City, merchants, government officials and advisors, architects, artists, record keepers, historians. I mean, all kinds of positions are going to be filled here in the Imperial City. So this is a real job creator just to construct it. It also makes great use of that Grand Canal system. So Yongle oversees the renovation of the Grand Canal as well. So it's quite sprawling, and because it's kind of off limits to commoners at the time, it's also known as the Forbidden City. So you'd have to get very special permission to enter, to seek an audience, even with the emperor. So during his reign, Yongle is also known for this. He's known for the voyages of ZhongHa. And ZhongHa, he, at a young age, he's like 10 years old, he belongs to a Mongol tribe. He's kind of kidnapped in a battle, and he's forced to become a eunuch. He's actually Muslim. And he basically is going to elevate his position tremendously after he's captured. He's got a real mind for education, for learning. He separates himself militarily. He's an imposing figure. He's quite large, actually. And Yongle is actually going to give him a commission. He seems to have a mind for seafaring and navigation, so he's going to send him out on a series of voyages. Yongle, that is, who is pictured right here. And Yongle is not the kind of guy you would say no to. He actually has his nephew. He kind of like deposes his nephew, who has a more legitimate claim to the throne. He actually has his supporters murdered and tortured. And basically says, you can be next. So he's going to give up the throne to Yongle, his nephew anyway. And this is how you prove that you have the mandate to heaven. I mean, you're willing to go to certain lengths, and you're able to get away with certain things. And how could you get away with like murder if you weren't in fact supported by the heavens? So kind of an important lesson here, and we're going to see that actually play out. So when Yongle tells ZhongHa that, I'm going to give you an admiralship and put you out to sea, he knows that it's a tremendous opportunity, and he also knows that saying no could be a death sentence. So ZhongHa is going to go on 7 separate voyages, made between 1405 and 1433. And go ahead and look online, actually, and you'll see a size comparison to the ships that he was rolling out with versus Christopher Columbus. And you'll see that the kind of ship, those caravels that Columbus was on, are dwarfed by these giant ships that ZhongHa had access to. And his fleet is considerable. I mean, yeah, he might have to deal with monsoons and pirate attacks, but I gotta tell you, you had to be a real pirate king to go after a fleet of 62 ships with nearly 28,000 men. They were a tremendous force, navally speaking. And they go all over Southeast Asia, the western coast of India. They make their way into East Africa. And they're not only going to trade and exchange goods and ideas from China, but they're also going to take back with them various goods and ideas from these places, particularly from Africa into China. So they spread their influence tremendously. But it's after Yongle and ZhongHa that they kind of become more isolationist. We're going to see elements of that play out in the later Ming and Qing dynasties as well, especially as more and more Europeans start come knocking at China's wall, as it were. And here you can see kind of a map of the various voyages of ZhongHa. So let's move that forward. So they become more isolationist right around the time that Europeans start coming into China. So, you know, Marco Polo had his day in the 1200s, and now the Portuguese will have theirs in the 1500s. And the first Portuguese fleet arrives off the coast of China in 1514. And this is at a time, you know, like I said, the Ming government is kind of at their height of power. They don't really feel like there's a lot of tremendous benefit in, you know, goods, European goods, initially anyway, until they start getting some access to them. The emperor, all Europeans are basically kind of just barbarians. You know, they're just an unusual form of barbarian. But to the Chinese ruler, you know, the rulers of all other countries, be they barbarians or not, they're basically like younger brothers of the Chinese emperor, who is, as his people would see him, as the son of heaven, you know, very influential. He has the mandate of heaven, you know, he's number one. So the Portuguese are actually going to be, you know, they're going to make their presence known throughout Asia, and they're also going to cause a lot of consternation and outrage, mostly because of proselytizing Catholicism, trying to convert various peoples, the Chinese, the Japanese, to Catholicism, and they sort of anger local customs, Confucianists, Buddhists. They don't take too kindly to this new god that's being introduced by these Portuguese. So as a result, they will be allowed in a very limited capacity to trade within China. And this is actually going to be a policy we're going to see utilized from the Ming to the Qing. And it's really, you know, despite whatever insult they caused initially by introducing, you know, Catholicism, it's really the trade of goods and ideas that, you know, keeps them around, that the Chinese keep them around, such as, you know, their clocks. They are really impressed by the clocks. They're impressed by the introduces of eyeglasses that allow officials to read their texts in more advanced ages. And conversely, Christian missionaries, you know, such as the Jesuits, they're very impressed by, you know, teachings of Confucius, the wide availability of written works, and certainly the Imperial City would have really struck a chord. Chinese architecture is very impressive. So there's a lot of interest by Europeans in China at this point. But not everything is good. We're going to see that coming up in just a moment. Hang in there, folks.